We're joined by Zach McKinnell from FCS Central on SI as we get ready for the SoCon football season to begin. Biggest storylines?
Man, there's so many to hit. I think for the SoCon, it's that spot for the right there behind the Missouri Valley Big Skies kind of opened up with how tumultuous the CAA's been through realignment. I think coming off of last year, the SoCon only getting one team in the postseason, you kind of look for this to be a bounce back year. You have a lot of teams bunched at the top of the conference. Furman should be a lot better. I think the race for the SoCon nationally is one of the more interesting ones, and there's a big spot to be claimed there. And even with the Ivy League joining the playoffs, I think the SoCon should be able to strive for 2 to possibly 3 bids in the postseason. I think that's, for the conference, one of the biggest storylines is, can you bounce back after just getting one bid last year?
One bid because they just beat each other up. It's a true round robin, which is different than most other top leagues. Does that hurt the SoCon?
It does to a point, but also, too, you look at some of the out-of-conference games that were lost. I think specifically Western Carolina losing that Campbell game, how big did that hurt? And even though it was a game that they were not supposed to win, ETSU had a chance to close out North Dakota State at home. If they win that game, they're probably in. If Western Carolina wins that Campbell game, they even have a better chance of getting in. Then also there were some unfortunate injuries, right? Chattanooga loses their starting quarterback. Cole Gonzalez goes out for Western Carolina. Now, listen, Taron Dickens was actually really, really good when he came in. But then Furman being young, it was a weird down year for Furman, which I think hurt the top of the conference a bit. And also, I just think it's very rare to see a team like Mercer, outside of the one little slip up at Sanford, walk through the conference like they did, especially year one of Mike Jacobs. They were so impressive defensively. There was a time where they were trending to be one of the best defenses of all time statistically before it kind of came back toward the norm. I don't know if it's just a round robin. It's also winning those key out-of-conference games. When you do have a round robin, you have to get through out-of-conference play with a clean slate. And then also, too, I think you've got to avoid those D2 games. I think the committee is starting to set that trend where you look over the past few years, Incarnate Word got left out at 9-2 because they played a non-Division I opponent. FAMU gets left out at 9 wins. They played a non-Division I opponent. And even back a handful of years ago, I don't remember the exact year, but McNeese got left out at 9 wins because they played a non-Division I opponent. They've set the standard. I think teams have to adjust scheduling-wise. You have to get a D1 opponent in that spot. As important as a home game is for money, revenue, at the end of the day, you want to be in the playoffs, you have to play a Division I opponent.
Scheduling is so difficult and it's so political and there's so much money involved. How do you balance it?
I think home and homes are important. As scheduling teams in your region, right? Because you don't want to. I get why a team like, let's just say VMI or Western Carolina, doesn't want to go play Montana. How much out of the travel budget for the year does that take out? But there's enough teams in that region, in the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, even the Alabamas, right? You can go play out in Alabama State and Alabama A&M. You can go play a UT Martin, a Tennessee State, a Murray State up in Kentucky, who's now in the Missouri Valley. There's teams in your region where you can minimize travel, and scheduling a home and home would really be beneficial there. And I think that's something with the new 12-game schedule that's coming to FCS, we should be promoting more as home and home series rather than just, a one-off series where it might be a neutral site and or one team gets the home game and the other team gets kind of left in the dust. And so hopefully we can promote more out-of-conference games in region, because I think like North Carolina Central's done a good job of that in the MEAC, where they've played teams from the CAA, they've played teams from the SoCon, they've even ventured into Southland territory this year. I think that's something the SoCon teams can take advantage of, because you have the SWAC, the Southland, the OVC Big South, some of the CAA teams. There's so many teams in your region that you shouldn't have a problem finding regional out-of-conference matchups that limit your travel.
If the SoCon is in discussion to be among the 3 best leagues, and like you said, with the attrition in some other leagues, that makes a great deal of sense. Shouldn't they be more proactively able to get bids into the championship?
I think so. I just think it's taken, and I've had a conversation about this on my show, I think it takes the playoff committee some time, especially due to the turnover we see every handful of years on the committee as people get on and get off. Your internal biases change every few years. So maybe this committee does not love non-Division I games. What happens when all those people are off of the committee and the new committee doesn't really care about that. I think for the SoCon, it's just changing the perception, because I don't think some of the people who are on the playoff committee, I think that's why I would push for some of the national media to be on this playoff committee board, because I would say that a lot of the national media watches more games nationally than some of the ADs that are on the playoff committee. But the biggest thing is just understanding that this conference is so unique in terms of the round robin style, and they've had some big out of conference wins. As much as we just talked about some of the slip ups out of conference, there's been some massive out of conference wins for the SoCon as well. And I do think the individual talent matches up with just about any other conference in the FCS.
Is polling problematic in the transfer portal era, where it's really unclear at the beginning of the year who's going to be good, and then we have this anchoring bias where if you're ranked early, it seems like you tend to be ranked late?
Well, I can't speak for all the voters, but for me and my co-host Timothy Rosario, who's another writer on the website, he'll be voting this year in the top 25 poll. What we try to do is we try to rank transfers based on not just FBS drop-downs, but did you play? So we look at non-Division I transfers, because there's a handful of FCS schools that landed D3 All-Americans, D2 All-Americans. I value those transfers more impactful this next year than an FBS drop-down who has 150 snaps played over his past 3 years. So I think it's one, we have to take the time to analyze what transfers you're bringing in, what positions too, because I think when you look at the data, there's certain positions transfers are typically more successful in. It's hard to be successful in the offensive line because of the cohesiveness and chemistry you have to build with your teammates. But how many wide receivers have we seen come out of the portal that are All-American, All-Conference level? So I think that's the first step. But then also, too, the voters itself. I know myself, Sam Herder, my guy Timothy, we all wipe our ballots clean for the first 5 weeks. So I'll submit my preseason ballot. When I'm building my week 1 ballot, I start from complete scratch. Like, there's no spot. So I think back a few years ago when Western Carolina had that run where they upset Stanford to start the year, I had Western Carolina in my top 15 by like week 4 or 5, but they're not in the top 25 because you have all these voters who are scared to move them up. And same for North Dakota last year when they knocked off Montana. I wasn't right. North Dakota was in my top 10 week 2. They weren't in my preseason top 25. So I didn't have them ranked and they were in the top 10 because I can only base you on what you put on your resume for 2025. My thoughts about your team in 2024 should not impact that. And I think more voters should do that and get away from the biases. But then at the same time, you have to kind of balance. I know this is going to sound contradictory, but it's weird. You have to balance not to overreact to a win, because you look at that Western Carolina over Stanford win, Stanford ended up not being very good that year. So how important was that win? And then you also have to not anchor yourself to early preseason wins, because you look back now Stanford, or you even look at Kennesaw State a few years ago, preseason top 10 team, they don't finish ranked. ETSU, after they made that big run in the postseason, they came into the next season highly ranked. They ended up winning, I think, 3 games the next year. So you have to be careful not to anchor yourself to early season, preseason expectations. But if I had it my way, and I know we can't do this because everyone loves polls at this time of year, man, I think we should wait till about week 2, 3 to release a poll. But it's unrealistic to say that. I just think voters have to be more open-minded to changing their ballots quicker or more dramatically early in the season.
In the SoCon, the coaches poll has Mercer as the preseason favorite, but no one has repeated in half a decade, 6 different champions in the last 6 years. How do you look at the league?
I think Mercer has earned the right to be preseason favorite. I think the thing that makes him intriguing is DJ Smith. He battled injury last year and ended up losing his job. And I would be curious to see what he looks like with a fully healthy year. If he stays 100% healthy, because he shows some insane flashes. You have Zach on the edge, who, in my opinion, I think has the potential to be the best defensive player in the FCS. I think that's his ceiling, especially as a true sophomore. Like, as a true freshman, he was doing unbelievable things, but they lose their entire linebacking core. They lose some key pieces at corner. Can that defense be as good as it was a season ago? And I think when you look at the conference race, Western Carolina is so interesting. But on the flip side, Western Carolina has been interesting for about 4 years now. This feels like the team that Kerwin Bell's been building to. If you can't get it done this year, you look and it's like, what are they missing? Because I'll say this. I think Dickens has a chance, and I don't want to be disrespectful because I'm a huge Cole Gonzalez fan. I think Dickens' ceiling is higher than Cole's was. And here's why. Like, he kind of reminds me, and everyone knows Lindsey Scott, from Incarnate Word. If you go back and look at Lindsey Scott at Nichols, Dickens shows some flashes very similar to Lindsey Scott there. So how good can he eventually be? We know the offense is going to score, but can Kerwin get the defense at a championship level? And then obviously ETSU would be my next just dark horse here, just because, I mean, how often do we see two FBS quarterbacks, one with conference championship experience, transfer to FCS? Not only that, they bring in another starter who started in the ACC for a really good North Carolina team. That quarterback battle is so interesting, and Coach Healy has won at this level. He's built championship programs. So I think ETSU and Western Carolina are going to have a lot to say about this conference race.
You mentioned Zoc, Dickens, the two transfer quarterbacks at ETSU. One or two or three other players you're really excited to watch this year?
I'm interested to see the development of Trey Hedden at Furman at quarterback. I think he had the prototypical true freshman season where he showed really big highs. He had some big wins, but then also there were some really low moments as he grew into his role. I think when you look at Furman as a program, that's what they were last year. They were young in so many places, and you saw it come out in bad ways where they lost some close games, but now all those guys are back. And if there's one coach in the conference, and Coach Hendricks, that I believe can develop some talent, he's the guy. So I think Trey Hedden's development is really important. I'm looking just across the conference as well. I think DJ Smith is the guy I kind of talked about. His development is going to change the league, because if he's as good as he can, if as a lot of people think he can be, he's going to be unbelievable. And then just looking across the conference, just off the top of my head, gosh, and this is a good question because there's so many guys that are running through my head right now. I'll be curious, and this is more of a position more than a guy, because I don't know who's going to step up there, but Furman's edge rushers have been so good. When you look at Luke Clark and some of the guys that's come through Furman, I think we're gonna look, me and you are gonna look at the end of the year, and they're gonna have a first team all conference guy in that position, and I don't know who it's gonna be. And I just know they got a young guy there who's ready to put up 8.5 to 10 sacks or double-digit tackles for loss, because that little edge/hybrid linebacker position they're so aggressive with how they run their defense. I think someone is going to emerge there, and that's a position I'm so excited to see.
Zach, thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the season.
Thank you, man.